Hello, American Literature 1. We are making our way into week 12 of the semester, so we have about a month left. These last few weeks move pretty quickly, but I think that we've paced ourselves well enough that you shouldn't feel like the readings and assignments at the end of the semester are overwhelming or will catch you off guard. So hopefully you are keeping up week by week on your readings and your writing assignments. And within the next week or so, you will have the breakdown of the next few weeks, including your final assignment, which your final exam in this course, the assignment that will be worth the most points, that will show what you've learned this semester, where you want to show off, basically, will be an essay. So that assignment will be posted in the next week or so. So I'm going to share my screen so we can look at where we are now, what things will look like for the next week or so. And this, again, will be a very brief overview video just so we can touch base. Okay. Here we are. So this is our class. Again, you've spent a lot of time in here. I don't need to give you a full orientation, but I will say to remember that up at the top of the class in course details and resources, there are a lot of resources that you can be using now and as we approach the final essay assignment. So here we are in week 12. Your assignment this week will be readings for the most part, watching videos. And this week, and I've kind of told you this before, that if you're going over our YouTube playlist and there's a really massively long video, whether it's a lecture or an audiobook, that's not required. It's just something that I wanted to include for reference. But the short videos, yes, please watch those. But the audiobooks or long lectures are just if you're interested. One of your reading assignments this week is the Declaration of Sentiments. You can read it here. It takes you to the National Historic Park in New York, the Women's Rights Museum, the National Park Service. So the Declaration of its Sentiments, you will notice as you're reading this, and there are a couple of videos that give you context for this document, that it sounds familiar. The Elizabeth Cady Stanton and the others who crafted the Declaration of Sentiments did so very strategically to mimic the Declaration of Independence. So you can see the introduction here, when in the course of human events it has become necessary, like, oh, that sounds familiar. And yes, because roughly 75 years prior, the United States had issued its Declaration of Independence. And here we have a group of women's rights advocates, which also included men, and it included Frederick Douglass, issuing a similar sort of declaration about women's rights. And rhetorically, it's really brilliant that they choose to model the Declaration after the Declaration of Independence, because throughout, they do so to expose the hypocrisy of the founders, that this list of things that Britain was doing, that's basically being done to women in their own country. So again, rhetorically, be thinking about that as you read this. And you might want to pull back up the Declaration of Independence to actually compare and see how closely, on purpose, they aligned their rhetoric. And this week, we are dealing a lot with rhetorical analysis. Last week, you got a much stronger taste of fiction, which I know a lot of you were excited about. I'll stress that in this early American literature, we're not kind of fiction heavy or poetry heavy, because that wasn't, we're getting to the point in American history where that was becoming more popular in the early to mid to later 1800s. So this is when poetry, short fiction, was really becoming part of the cultural vernacular. So we saw a lot of it last week, and kind of entering into this deeply American forms of short fiction and poetry, dark romanticism, and starting next week, we will delve back in to more fiction. But this week, of course, is very much about kind of the rhetoric that is shaping American history at this point in the 1800s. So the Declaration of Sentiments is one of those texts. The Sojourner Truth speech, Aren't I a Woman? Your textbook includes what we know to be the most historically accurate version of that speech. However, oftentimes when you hear that speech referenced, it's not that version. So this is a really awesome website that I've linked to. So you'll read the intro and the text in your textbook, but I also would like for you to play around a little bit on this website because it shows the two common speeches that are attributed to her. This one on the right is the one that's often included in textbooks, included in public readings, and it's quite likely that it's incredibly historically inaccurate. Her first language was Dutch. She would not have had this Southern dialect. However, we talk about, in terms of rhetorical analysis, that when Frances Gage put forth this version, Gage was friendly to the movement. She was not being unfriendly or hostile by characterizing her speech in this way. She was rhetorically trying to kind of fit into people's stereotypes of what they would have thought a freed slave sounded like. So please explore this website. It's really interesting in terms of how it delves into rhetoric. And then our supplementary lesson this week. Each week we typically will have, okay, we're going to learn about, the news media in colonial America also. This week I have a link to a podcast about the birth of American music. And this podcast is in conjunction with the 1619 Project from the New York Times, which I've linked before. I highly recommend it as all of the articles that it contains and the photos, but also the podcast series is really great. But this is a 30-minute listen, and I think that you'll really enjoy it. So those are the kind of extra texts you'll read this week or delve into or listen to. The other things that you'll read this week, the Gettysburg Address, that should sound familiar. The video that I've included in our playlist gives a great introduction that talks about how the speaker before Lincoln had talked for, his speech was, I think, over 2 hours. And then Lincoln takes the stage, and you know how long the Gettysburg Address is. It's very, very brief. And some newspaper writers just skewered him about how simple and too short it was, yet it has stood the test of time in such a way because of its conciseness. So again, when we're thinking about the rhetorical situation, his role as the American president during a civil war, how carefully he had to choose his words and how powerful it is in that very short speech. So be thinking about that. Margaret Fuller, an incredibly important writer. She was heavily involved in the Transcendental movement, working with Emerson and some of the writers that you read a couple of weeks ago. She was the first editor of the Dial magazine, and this is one of her most famous selections, dealing predominantly with women's rights. When you look into Fuller's biography, you will see that from a very early age, she was educated very formally. Her father basically made exceptions because most girls at the time were not given that privilege. And if you study women's literature throughout history, you'll find that it's a pattern that, a woman who was given privileges starting in childhood in terms of educational opportunities, that really changed things. So Fuller fits into that mold. And then the rest of the selections for this week are in one of the special sections that your book has. This specifically about slavery, race, and the making of American literature. So for some of these, writers and speakers. There are little videos to go along with them. These are all quite short. So yeah, for the most part, you're reading this week. It's a lot of titles, but many of them are relatively brief. So go over them carefully, be thinking constantly. And part of your assignment for your writing is to go back to week 4. So I'll do that really quickly. If you remember week 4, I have some resources about the rhetorical situation and the rhetorical appeals. I want you to revisit those this week. So this is where we talk about thinking about the author or speaker, the situation that they are in. So what do we know about them? Their history, their identity, their education level. What do we know about the audience? What do we know about the topic at hand? And how that shapes the text itself. And then of course the context as well, time, place, etc. So being able to identify the pieces of the rhetorical situation is absolutely going to shift how you read and analyze a text. And then going a step further, thinking about the rhetorical appeals. So another triangle to remember: ethos, pathos, and logos. Pathos being the emotional appeal. Logos is logic, so statistics, quotes, facts. And then the ethos appeal is credibility, largely. Why do we trust the speaker or the writer in this situation? So if you can unlock your analytical potential by using the rhetorical situation and rhetorical appeals, it really cracks open a whole world of analysis, whether you are watching a movie, a commercial, reading a historical text. The rhetorical situation will really be a key to understanding far beyond what's on the surface. And that's what I'm asking you to do this week, because so much of what you're reading will be powerfully unlocked by thinking about the rhetorical situation. So I give just a little kind of handout about writing a mini essay, but you're writing this week. It's a little step beyond a reflection, not quite a full-fledged essay, but a bit more than a reflection. So I'm asking you to, again, revisit the rhetorical situation and appeals. And then I'm asking you to do a rhetorical analysis of 2 of the texts from the textbook this week. You may find similarities, you may find some meaningful differences, but I want you to consider the rhetorical situation and appeals in 2 of the texts this week, and weave them together in a way that makes sense and makes a claim about something, and try to weave in the terminology as well. This should be about 3 to 4 paragraphs, really brief intro, a couple of body paragraphs, and a brief conclusion. You will use MLA in text citation, but you do not need to include a works cited page. So yeah, those are the kind of basic parameters. Again, think of this as it's more than a reflection, but not quite a full-fledged essay. Thus the mini essay title. So I hope that everything is kind of coming together and making sense. Be on the lookout. I will be posting, it's very likely that in the next week or so, I will open up at least kind of final assignments, so you'll know exactly what we're doing for the next few weeks. You should have a pretty clear view of that, certainly before Thanksgiving, but really mid next week, we should be able to have kind of a long view of how we're finishing up the semester. If you have any questions, please let me know. Email me via Canvas. If you want to have a Zoom chat, that's great. Probably more toward the end of the semester, I will open up more formal Zoom times. The last couple of weeks have just been a little bit bonkers, to be honest. So, but there will be times where we can, and you can always request a one-on-one Zoom conversation, but there will be times where I'll kind of open it up, like for anyone in the class, if you want to have a discussion, we can have a Zoom time. So be on the lookout for that as well. Let me know if you need anything, if you have any questions, or if anything is unclear. If you're still thinking about classes for next semester, I am teaching American Lit 2. So if that is persuasive or not, if you're interested in taking the second section of this course. And then I'm also teaching Intro to Film Studies on Monday afternoons. We'll screen a number of films and go throughout history and delve into film analysis. And I'm also teaching African American literature on Monday and Wednesday mornings. So those are on-campus courses. So if you have any questions about classes or majors, if you're interested in pursuing English or any kind of media studies or journalism, let me know. That is what I'm here for. I hope you are having a good semester so far, even amidst all of the uncertainty and everything in the world. You are living and learning through a really tough time in history. And this chapter of your life, the college years, they're tough anyway. So the fact that there are so many more challenges in your path is really something. And hopefully you know that what you're doing right now and the fact that you're sticking through it and keeping going and investing in your future, because what's on the other side of this and what's on the other side of your college career is better. Things will get better. So keep going. Let me know if you need anything. This video was about 10 times longer than I thought it would be. So thanks for sticking around. And I look forward to talking to you or reading your writing soon.